people, but
She's Miranda.
she's not Brandon. He's Brandon.
That's true. And this is Brandon and Miranda review music and stuff.
And things.
And things.
Today, we are talking about Hillsong United's recent album that came out the same day as Taylor Swift's single Me came out, fun fact, called People. This is their 14th live album. I don't know about studio album, but also Hillsong is just one big mess. So basically, if you don't know, Hillsong is a church in Australia. They started in Australia. They wanted to create like a youth-ish band, so they created Hillsong United. And then those people grew up, and they said, okay, well, this is now more just our making music, because everything else is like worship and live albums. So they said, we'll just do like studio albums and we're their creative side, I guess. And then they have Hillsong Young and Free, that is now their young kids album. Not kids, because they have Hillsong Kids. But anyway, but this one is different also because it is a live album, which they have released in the past. And Hillsong Worship specifically makes it for worship. And it's not that United doesn't want to do worship, but that's just not their main goal, I think. But I don't know. Why don't you go ask Joel Houston?
So now, is Hillsong United, is it the same group of 5 or 6 people or whatever, or is it constantly revolving?
It kind of is constantly revolving. So since their Zion album came out, I'm pretty sure that they just did this on their Instagram, where the longest members have obviously been Joel, who is the pastor and creator of Hillsong Church's son, and a couple other guys that I really I do not know, but there's there's a few people who have been constant in there, and then there's people that they add on so often, because Brooke Frazier has never been in Hillsong United, but she was featured on the album. And so it's just different people of Hillsong can be featured on it, but it's usually the same core people, which I think is Joel Houston, JD. I don't want to keep naming people because I'm going to get it wrong, but Taya Smith is also there. And yeah.
So now in the Christian music community, is Hillsong known as typically do people love them, or are they just really huge, so it's just this machine, or what? Because I know whenever I hear about them, usually I might hear a song or two, but I'm used to hearing in the news them saying this and people getting mad.
Yeah, I mean I don't know if it's just it's too big that people just can't relate it all to everything, because there's one in New York and there's one in California, there's now one in Phoenix, there's some in America, and then there's a bunch everywhere else in the world, and so there's a lot of different things happening. I mean, it is a megachurch, and I feel if anybody thinks about a megachurch nowadays, that's what they think about, or Joel Osteen's church, but it truly is it has many branches, and they put out the most content, I think, of any of the churches that are mega churches. And so I think that though when people think about Hillsong, they're usually talking about the music, and they're usually talking about their worship music. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're just talking about Hillsong worship. They could be talking about The Stand, which is by Hillsong United, or any other famous Hillsong affiliated worship song. Yeah. And so I don't think that it's often a band that people listen to exclusively to listen to it. I think it's just solely for worship purposes. Okay. Unless you're crazy like me. Just really like listening to music, and especially Hillsong.
All right. Well, with that said, let's dive into this. As far as the good, first thing I wrote down is I was impressed going into this. I'd only listened to a couple of Hillsong stuff, and I really wasn't excited to listen to this. I was thinking, okay, I don't want to just go on this rant about worship music or whatever. So I was thinking, okay, let me see if I can find something. But I was impressed just with the whole album. I had very low expectations, but I felt definitely surpassed them. And I was happy with the album. I didn't go through it or sit there and find myself thinking, oh, when is this song going to be over or whatever. So I enjoyed it. And I think coming from someone who isn't a worship fan, that's a perspective that's pretty cool with these albums. Is I think whenever we come across an album that I might love, but you don't know the artist or you don't really care for them, or vice versa, it's just cool seeing the other perspective. So as someone who doesn't really know worship music, or probably even really enjoy it, I found myself enjoying listening to this album. And also I wrote down, Hillsong is cool. And now, the whole thing of a worship artist or band being cool, that's a whole nother, debate or whatever, whether that's good or bad. But I felt like listening to it, it didn't feel like the whole, here's just a guy up there with, a guitar thinking, okay, everyone, let's sing. It felt like, not having seen the concert, but it felt like there's production value to it. These people are taking time to build their set list, to put on a good show. So I definitely enjoyed it. Like I said, that's a whole nother debate. You can debate whether it's good or bad, but that was just kind of my takeaway, is that it just felt like there was production and time spent on this.
Yes, I have another thing to add to the backstory. So they released Wonder in 2015, maybe? Mm-hmm. Or 16 actually, I think. And they took a hiatus because they were I feel like we're clunking stuff out too much. Mm-hmm. And then they just had all these songs. I think they started, Good Grace was the first one that they had, and they were okay, we need to make an album. And then Therefore People was brought about. So it was after a hiatus. Mm-hmm. So what I really liked about the album, I think that it's very meaty, in that even if it's just a simple concept, it's handled really robustly. Mm-hmm. and then a robust subject, I think, is handled completely well. I know that some people can disagree, and sometimes I do as well, that the way that they execute some of it is just it's too much sometimes. Yeah. But I do think that that they kind of, I just think that the way that they put it out, because I think that Good Grace even is kind of not a simple song, but mm-hmm. the lyrics are kind of just this is it. And I think that they, even in that, just cover it well enough for it to be clearly executed, if mm-hmm. that makes sense. You're nodding, so I'm hoping it makes sense. What did you not like about the album?
What I didn't like about the album was, I felt the middle slowed down a lot, and it just came to a screeching halt. And that happens with a lot of albums, and I felt you can handle it well. It's all about spacing out the songs wherever, whether it's a live album like this or a regular album, it's all about spacing it out. That way you don't have 5 songs that are super energetic and then you have 5 songs that are super slow. So I felt in the middle it kind of went to a lull, and I felt like I was just listening to just any old kind of worship thing where it just slows down. It's people just being let me sing about these chains that are on me, or the fire is going out, or whatever. Worship stuff. And also comparing it to the Phil Wickham one we did a couple of weeks back, the sing along before, I found myself enjoying the Phil Wickham one because it was more of I think worship should be something that everyone's involved. Whereas this one, even though the production value was there, me being the worship expert that I just said I was, I feel you don't want to just go to a worship thing, because then it starts becoming more of oh man, I can't wait to see these people are so cool, versus if you're worship, it should be more about oh, you're there to worship God or whatever. Because I've been in places before where just look at the people on stage and I'm they're here to be they see themselves as rock stars. They don't see themselves as people here thinking, I hope someone gets saved tonight. Instead they're thinking, man, I hope we get that standing ovation at the end. So that was kind of the I guess the biggest negatives that I pulled from it.
I think that to respond to that, because I've seen them live and I've seen a lot of Hillsong live, mm-hmm. I think that it's really hard when you're such a big like when you have like a lot of reach in your worship songs for people not to like fawn over you and stuff. But I think that they do a really good job of combating that. Like, I don't think that they ignore it, which would be even worse because then they'd just be like, whatever, let people do what they do. I think that they really, like, do genuinely try to point it to God. And I think it's really hard, especially because, like, Taya Smith sang Oceans and, like, everybody's, like, freaking out all the time about Oceans. And she's amazing at, like, pointing it back to God and making sure that it's not about her and her amazing voice. I think it's just... it's hard when you have that wide of a reach and that popularity because, I mean, like, it blew up when it first came out, and I think that everything she does from now on, it's just like an artist on the radio has a really good song, like Lil Nas X, like, everybody's, like, in love with him because of Old Town Road, but, like, they may not have ever heard of him or cared about him if he didn't have that really big song. So I feel like, yes, that's true, people shouldn't do that, but I feel like they combat it very well. And, like, knowing who they're doing it for. Anyway, so what I like about the album, or what I don't like about the album, kind of goes along with what you said. I feel like a lot of the songs, like, they were started by different people, and then in the end, they were just, like, taken over by Joel or Taya. And, I mean, like, they're amazing, and I love them, but, like, the, As You Find Me had this amazing man singing it, and then, like, in the second part, it seemed like Teo was only there to do harmony, but then it was just all her, and I was just like, I want him back. He's so good. He was just, like, doing riffs on the side. Yeah. But, I mean, and I'm sure, like, it's not, like, you know, malicious or anything, but I just wanted to hear more of other voices just because we were introduced, because I think the guy who sings Another in the Fire was a new guy, too. I don't know. He doesn't look familiar, but he looks young. And then, like, in the end, Joel was singing all of that, and then he sang the next two songs. But then the guy who sings Highlands, whose name is Ben, he sang the end of Echoes, which was a nice change. Not because it got rid of Joel, but because, you know. Also, I think that, like, even though I said that they're not there for worship, I think that they presented it kind of as a worship album, like back when they used to... I don't remember what their album with the stand is called, but, like, when they used to put out worship albums, I feel like they kind of presented it as a worship album, and not all the songs are very congregational. Yeah. And I don't like when people play uncongregational songs, but I think it's also at fault of the person for presenting them like that. Yeah. And so, like, my old church did Ready or Not, and I'm like, it's a good song, and I guess it is, like, a good intro song, but it's also not really congregational. Yeah. Like, that's one of my biggest things, but that's a whole other video.
So far we've just said in the future we'll have, like, bonus videos where, like, can you be cool and be a worship artist? Like, can you sing, like, difficult songs?
Watch out for the extras to this series of videos.
Favorite song, mine was Ready or Not. It's funny, the first time I heard it, as soon as it came on, I thought, this is... But then I found myself in the middle of it thinking, that's a pretty good song. Then I went back a couple times and listened to it to make sure that I was right, and I did enjoy that song. Another in the Fire was probably the second, like a close second behind. Nice. So the two that most stood out.
Nice. I think musically the album is amazing, but... That doesn't have anything to do, but I was just thinking about the beginning of Ready or Not, and it made me happy. I think, like, as somebody who, like, leads worship and stuff and likes singing worship songs, I really love singing Whole Heart, and I think that it's, like, a really good key, and it's fun to sing, but that's not necessarily my favorite song. My favorite song, like, all over lyrically is... That's hard because it's just, like, it's such a good lyrical album. Because I was just thinking Might Sound Wild is, like, just such a good lyric content. But I already picked two, which was Starts and Ends and Highlands. Okay. Which I literally, like, every single verse of Highlands, I'm just like, it's true. But yeah, I really like those two. And I think that the way that, like, there's just so much, but it's just, like, a little song. And there's so much in there that just, like, is so personal and yet, like, reaching. Although I don't think that Starts and Ends would be really good congregationally, just because there's so many lyrics, and it's just so hard to like keep up if you don't know the song.
Mm-hmm.
But that's besides the point.
Final thoughts. My biggest takeaway was, I guess, don't, if you in the past have not liked Hillsong, you might want to give them another chance. I think also keeping in mind that, like you had said, that Hillsong is all these different branches of it. So I know that's not really this album specific, pointing at it, but that was kind of eye-opening to me to see that there are all these different Hillsongs. So I guess if you haven't liked past Hillsong, just keep in mind that it is rotating. So I think this album kind of showed me that, well, there's different people up there. You don't just have like if you don't like Chris Tomlin, you just have Chris Tomlin. Whereas this one, you might find
different
yourself
styles too.
Yeah. So that was my biggest takeaway from the album.
Listen to The Greatest Commandment by Hillsong Kids. That's my jam. This is the greatest commandment. Anyway, I work in kids' church a lot. My overall review of the album is that I think it's one of their best. It's hard because I think Wonder was amazing, but it kind of felt like really try hard. Like I felt like they were like, we want to make a studio album, we don't want to make a live album, and they kind of like tried too hard to make it a studio album. And so I'm really glad that they made a live album and that it was just kind of like, I feel like it was relatively short for them, which I think was good because they kind of just like, they had what they had and they put it out there. And I think that from now on, like, they're not gonna, because of the hiatus they took, they're not gonna try to force anything, which, I mean, I'm sure they didn't force anything because, I don't think anybody would be forcing them. Mm-hmm. But I do think that they did, I think that, like, this one felt very natural and, like, they wanted to put it out. Mm-hmm. And so I like that feel of it, and I think it's a very good album.
Right, there you go. If you liked this video, then make sure you like this video. If you want to comment, then comment.
Whoa.
And make sure you subscribe to this video.
Subscribe to the video?
Yes. Subscribe to the video.
Channel. And subscribe to the video series that we make of all the topics we responded to.
If you enjoyed us talking about this and you want to hear us talk about more Hillsong or another artist that we haven't covered, make sure to leave it in the comment section or shoot us a message saying who we should cover next and discuss their albums.
If you hate our opinions, tell us to change who we are, and we will consider it. And
we have a lot of friends. We can pull another friend. I know Kelsey listens to Christian music.
Don't say pull another friend as in I'm the only one leaving. Okay, this is called the Miranda and Brandon Show. It's called the Miranda and sometimes Brandon Show.
The Brandanda.
Yes. Anytime in my life somebody said Brandon, I always think they say Miranda.
What?
It sounds like Miranda. You don't know because you're a man.
Okay.
Goodbye.